Inside the code examples, let me try to open what is there as a CSS examples. Okay. Now, now you might be wondering what is this? What is CSS, and why do we need to learn another kind of style sheet? Okay, so CSS is, as we know, out of the three basic building blocks of World Wide Web, CSS is also one of them. Okay, like we have seen already an analogy of it, right? Like if I want to show you, we talked about that analogy. Someone trying to join. Yeah. So we were talking about one analogy that we wanted to see. One analogy was this analogy. So what was that? A football player in yellow jersey is kicking the ball. Okay, this is one example where we are trying to give you an analogy of a English grammar. Earlier, we gave you about a human skeleton, and the skin forms the CSS. That is absolutely right. And the person moving, jumping, walking will be the JavaScript there. In the same way, a football player is in yellow jersey, which he is wearing, and is kicking the ball. So the player will be kind of a HTML, okay, that defines the structure. And then CSS is like an adjective. A player is kind of a noun, and CSS is kind of an adjective. Adjective is in grammar which describes about the noun. Okay, so what is it describing? It's describing the look and feel of a person. So here it is saying that the color is yellow. Okay, and then JavaScript is about the action. The verb is all about action. In English, a bird is flying. Flying is an action. Okay, so that action in this case is representing JavaScript. All right, so with this the same understanding, what we need to see is CSS, which is stands for Cascading Style Sheet, is all about the look and feel or the appearance of a web page. Like in this case, the entire structure is like there is a header, there is a navigation bar, there is a body, and then there is a bottom. At the bottom we have a footer, all these, and in the middle we have a main, and then main contains multiple sections, and these sections contains again multiple divisions. That is there. Okay, this forms the basic structure or the skeleton of a web page. Okay, but now what we are going to talk about is the look and feel. Like you have a banner which is blue in color, there is an image being added on the right corner, and inside that there is a fact a simple a fact row which has got a blue background, and it fades a little bit as we move in the right side, which is basically a gradient. Okay, linear gradient is there. And then here the background color changes, and then we have included the image, and inside that image only one section is occupying certain position. And if I hover the text over it, it looks a little bit uh, animated, and how this can be achieved and all. So all this is can be done using CSS. And if I hover over the text little bit zooms when I hover the mouse over it. Okay, and these all can be done using CSS. Okay, we'll see how we can do that using CSS. And also there are a lot of things that we can do in terms of properties. Okay, you can change the font size, you can change the font color, and then you can change the font type. This is all related to the text formatting and text styling, we call it as. All right, so with this, let's see few of the beginnings here. Now, adding CSS to a HTML file. Now, there are multiple ways that you can add a file CSS to a HTML file. Let's see that how we can do it. Let's go to the example. Let me close this up and open our very old index.html. Okay. And now here there is something that we have added. Let me try to delete it. And now let's create a boilerplate. Exclamation followed by the tab key, and now I have this boilerplate ready. Let's say I have a h1 tag which says demo of CSS. Hmm. Let's say adding CSS to HTML. Okay. Demo. Yeah. Demo of adding CSS to HTML file. This is the H1 tag that I have created. Maybe I'll go ahead and create a couple of uh, um, paragraphs. Okay. Let's see. I have added basically two paragraphs. Again, I hope you guys understood how I have added. If you don't know, yeah, just let me try to explain it to you. So what I have done here, guys, P into 2, which means create two paragraphs. Okay. Inside these two paragraphs, add the lorem text with 100 words each. Okay. So paragraph 1 will contain 100 words and paragraph 2 will contain 100 words. This is a shortcut. Okay. Just I'll create that. And now there are two things that we have created. The first para, second para, and then there is a H1 tag that is added. If I go ahead and see the live server, the output of it, this is how it looks now. So very simple, nothing fancy about it. I'll just close this and then I'll close this. Yeah, just to the heading 1, paragraph and paragraph 2. All right. And now, what are the ways that I can add CSS to a HTML file? So the very first that we saw is usage of the style tag inside the head tag. Okay. Inside the head tag, I want to add what is known as a style tag. Okay. That is the first way. Now, what is the another way to do it? Oh, just a second. Yeah. Well, one is this way. Let's say I want to style it. The first is a CSS selector. We call this part as a CSS selector. Then it starts with the curly brackets, ends with the curly bracket. And then let's say I want to change the color to indigo. Let's say H1 tag. Then this is one way to include a CSS inside the HTML file, which is by using a style tag. And then there are CSS rules defined inside the style tag. So another, this is called internal CSS. Mind you guys, this is called internal CSS. Another way to do it is inline CSS, which is inside the tag itself. You are changing it using what we call it as a style attribute. Okay, this is called inline CSS. Here I am going to say background color I am going to make it as maybe uh, azure. Let's use azure. Okay, now this is a background color that I'm going to change. And this is using a style attribute and this is using a style element. Okay. This inclusion is called as internal CSS and this is called inline CSS, including in the element itself. So here, what is the difference? The internal CSS will be applied to all the H1 tags inside the file. For that matter, I have just created one H1 file, the H1 tag. There might be another H1 tag that I can create. Let's say uh, head2. Now these two are the H1 tags. Here, the internal CSS rule will apply for both of them because both are H1 tags. Whereas inline CSS will apply only to this particular tag where it is added in inline. Okay, understood this one?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. And now, what else we have is something called as one is inline, one is another is internal, and another is we call it as external CSS using this one. What we call it as link tag. This is called external CSS. Why? Because you are creating a CSS file itself and you are trying to add it. That is called external CSS. Okay. So there are three ways that we have added, and let's see the third way as well, how to do it. And now let's say here I'll try to use a link tag. Okay, link tag relationship to this document is a style sheet, and then I can go ahead and add maybe a CSS inside. I can say let's say I'll go here. Okay, go to maybe I can create a folder called CSS. There is already a folder created. I can create any name. I can give any name. Inside this, let's say I will go ahead and add a file name called let's say style.css. I mean, I can give any username. Okay, any file name, style.css. I'm just using a style.css. Here I can go ahead and directly add a tags like h1. I can go ahead and say border, let's say border, let's say it is 2 pixel solid. And then what is the color I want to give? Let's say it is blue. Now this is the now this type of adding where what we have doing, we are using a link tag, and then we are storing that file here, which means style.css file that we have added, which is this one. We are trying to include that as a external file. This is called external CSS. This is called internal CSS, which is applicable only to this file. And where is external CSS, this can be used in n number of HTML files. You can go ahead and include this, and that HTML file, whichever it might be, can also utilize this file. Here, internal CSS is only applicable to index.html file, whereas inline CSS is only applicable to one element where it is added inline. So there are three different ways that you can add CSS to a HTML file: inline, internal, and external CSS. Let's see the output, how it looks. So yeah, I mean, this is how the output looks. Mind you guys, this border what we have created is coming from this particular file, style.css. Whereas the color indigo, the font's color indigo is coming from the internal CSS, which is applicable for both the H1s. That is the reason the H1 this and H1 this are both are having the font color as indigo. And finally, the inline CSS, which is only one HTML element, that is H1, only one H1 tag is having a background color of azure. That is the reason you are seeing the azure background here, which is a light bluish color, whereas this H1 tag does not have that color, because here it is only inline CSS has been used. Okay, understood guys, the usage here?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. So yeah, I mean, that is about CSS. And before that, let's see if I can pull you something to show it up. This, yeah, if HTML is a skeleton, whereas CSS is kind of a skin, that we already saw that. Yeah, this is also analogy, we saw it. History, liberty. Yeah. What I wanted to show is this important feature here. So mind you guys, like the way that we saw the anatomy of HTML, this is the anatomy of CSS. Okay. Now, what is this contains? Why is this CSS 3, guys? Because the 3 stands for the version of the CSS that we are currently using. Can anyone tell me what version is the latest version in HTML?
HTML5.
Yeah, that's right. HTML5 is what we are using now in the latest version in terms of CSS is CSS 3. Okay, now this is called the anatomy of the CSS. So here, this entire CSS that we have added, like in our example, right, there was a h1, then curly brackets open and close. Inside that we added color is equal to indigo. That was the entire CSS that we have added internally. Okay, what I'll show you that example here. uh, yeah, this entire thing, the h1 open curly bracket open close curly bracket, and then there is a color and indigo. This entire thing is called a CSS rule. Okay, this is a CSS rule. This from the start to end, this is called a CSS rule. Now CSS rule has got two major parts in it. One is called the selector, which is a div. In this case, in our example, h1 was a selector. Okay, this is a selector, whereas whatever is there within the curly bracket, this is called the declaration block. This is called the declaration block, whereas the very first one, there is this div is a selector, and between the curly brackets, whatever this block is called a declaration block. Okay, and declaration block will contains multiple declarations. Okay, it might contain multiple declarations, and each declaration has got two entries there. One is called the property, another is called the value. Okay, color is the property, CSS property, whereas value is a CSS value. Okay, so the entire section is called a CSS rule. Okay, there are multiple rules that we can add in a CSS file or in a style tag, and at the same time each selector contains multiple declarations as well. Okay, you can have more than one declaration, like the way here we have added h1 is just color. Okay, what I can add is, again, I can add font size. Okay, font let's say font hyphen size. Okay, font hyphen size, let's say I want to make it as a 30 pixel. Okay, this is again what I'm trying to add here. This is a declaration. This is a selector, and this is a declaration block, and each one is a declaration contains, this is a property and this is a value, this is a property and this is a value. And at the same time, like we have one CSS rule, there might be a multiple CSS rule. Another rule can be only for a selector p. Okay, selector p, let's say we want to change the color of the font to, let's say, coral. Okay, now there is two rules of CSS that have been added. One rule is for the selector h1, another rule is for the selector p tag, or a p, what is paragraph. So now in this, can anyone tell me what is this coral called here in terms of CSS anatomy?
Value.
Yeah, value, declaration value, correct. And color is property.
Property.
Yeah, yeah. So this is a property, and what is this entire thing is called?
CSS rule.
Yeah, this is a CSS rule, correct. And what is H1 called here? Can
Selector.
anyone? Yeah, CSS selector. Yes, correct. So that is what you need to remember, because if I and you understand this, then whenever I'm teaching you, you will be able to understand what I'm talking about. The moment I say this selector we'll use and tag it in CSS file, so which means you need to understand that I'm taking certain selector and then I'm adding a certain CSS rule associated with it. Okay, so in that way, the terminologies should be very clear, and I want you to remember this for life. Okay, this doesn't change even after 10 years, until and unless we discontinue using CSS and something else will comes up. Okay, till that time, as long as CSS exists, this is the rule. Okay, all right, guys. I think it's 8:55. We'll call it a day, and tomorrow again we'll start it at 8 p.m. and then we'll start learning from there on. All right, guys. Thank you. And you guys have a good night, and see you tomorrow at the same time.